You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast alongside Mike Chappell and Joe Hopkins. I'm Dave Griffiths. As we tape this on Thursday, September, is this the first or the second? I can't even, this is the first. It's the first day of September because it's my dog's birthday today. Hey.
Happy birthday, Fido.
Chase, woo, yeah,
Chase.
him too. But we're celebrating 10 days until the Colts season opener right now as they travel to Houston on September 11th and take on the Texans in Week 1. We have a great show on tap today. We'll touch briefly a little bit on the last preseason game, but really our focus is on that 53-man roster, how the Colts trimmed down there. And they get 17 more with the extra international player exemption for the practice squad as well. So there's a solid 70 guys that are practicing out there right now, and Chap's pointing to his phone at the moment, so I'm sure that there's more breaking news that we're going to get to. So why don't we begin with that right off the top before we dive into Colts, because Chap sees that something is happening on his cell phone.
Schefter reporting, a loss before the season even begins. Titans pass rusher Harold Landry tore his ACL in practice.
That is massive.
That's a huge.
Landry is a really good player.
Yeah, I believe they just signed him to a big contract this past offseason.
They did. Like, they have a really good defensive line. That was the thing that was kind of steady on their defense, that they kind of changed the linebackers up here and there. They had some changes here in the secondary from time to time, but that defensive line, it had him. Is Jeffrey Simmons on that line? He's a rising player over the past couple years. Has really come on, in his young years out of Chris Hagan's alma mater, Mississippi State. So wow, no Harold Landry.
Yeah, 12 sacks last year. Really, their best edge pass rusher. I think they have. Who's the guy they signed from Pittsburgh? To rush?
Bud Dupree.
Bud Dupree. They have Bud Dupree as well, but
is Autry still there?
Danico Autry is still there.
I thought so.
Yeah,
You know, there's positions you can compensate for. Pass rusher is so hard.
Yeah,
to compensate for.
It really is. Yeah, each team has pretty much one guy that they kind of rely on a lot.
If you
Landry,
have two, you're lucky. But
yeah, Landry's a guy. I mean, 12 sacks in the season is a guy you rely on to change the other team's offense for sure. So now let's get into the news surrounding the Colts specifically. Shaquille Leonard has returned to practice, did so on Wednesday. So no action for the Maniac up in Westfield, but they get back to team headquarters, and he's good to go. His practice now 2 days, both yesterday, Wednesday, and today on Thursday. Has done some individual drills, a little bit in 7-on-7 together that the Colts tweeted out, some video of him. Missed the entire summer. He said 3.5 months. Somebody said, what's it been, about 2 months? And he rattled back immediately.
he knew he was clicking off the calendar in his head.
He was. And he's been counting down the days, Mike, until he can get back on the field and then to game time. He was very cagey when we talked about when he would be ready to play, but I'd imagine that he would rather be on the field sooner rather than later, just hearing him talk this afternoon.
Yeah, and as we talked, and Frank talked, the important thing was getting off PUP. So that you can practice, because people, if you're on PUP, it's four games. No, it's 4 games, and you can't practice.
Right.
So the question is going to be Week 1. I kind of doubt it. Week 2, I wouldn't rule it out. By Week 3, I think he's playing, but it's just going to, again, he's got to get in game shape. And Ballard mentioned that on Wednesday, I think it is, that it's different being out there and the mental reps and doing what you do with the rehab guys. It's just different playing football. It is. And he's now practiced twice in 8 months. Mm-hmm. So, but knowing him, the kind of player, the competitor he is, he's going to show everybody once again that they're wrong, and he'll be back sooner rather than later.
Darius certainly never one to hold a grudge at all in his life. But on that note, I've seen so many people point to Week 3, Joe, as the possibility for him to return against Kansas City. I think Week 2 is much more likely because of just how last season ended and how Darius likes to hold on to things more so than a lot of other players do. I guarantee that he wants to be back Week 2, not just aiming at Week 3 because it's the quote-unquote home opener. He doesn't want the team to go down to Jacksonville without him based on what happened last year and has happened every year in his career so far, to be sure.
That's a good point. I could see that when it kind of came out. I was watching you guys' tweets as they were coming out when Darius was speaking. I kind of turned to my coworker and I said Week 3 as well. Just kind of, it felt easy. That there's no gimmies in the NFL.
No.
Obviously, the Jacksonville Jaguars kicked the Colts out of the playoffs, but I think logically speaking, the Colts should be able to handle Jacksonville and Houston.
Logic has done nothing to help the Colts.
If they
the
can't
past 8
handle
years or whatever.
the first 2 games without Shaq, they have much greater issues than Shaq.
Exactly.
You're not wrong.
But if he's healthy, bring him back whenever he's ready.
Agreed.
I just think timing-wise, this week 3 would give him nearly a month from right now to kind of get into shape, to kind of feel comfortable, as Leonard put it.
Yeah.
So that would make sense. But you make a good point in week 2. I bet Shaq's got week 2 kind of circled.
And here's what I'm thinking, again, kind of going along that. Like this week he's practicing. Next week before week 1 he's practicing. Then the next week he's practicing before week 2. That's 3 full weeks of practice they can get before that week 2 game. And I'm not going to rule out even week 1, but 3 full weeks of practice out there on the field seems enough to me to ramp up and be ready to play.
I guess part of the question is, when does he get into full practice? My understanding, he was just doing individual drills yesterday.
Well, like I said, the Colts did tweet out some video of him in 7-on-7. It looked like making an interception or something. I don't know.
That.
I don't know if it was full 7-on-7, but it looked like I said, we're not out there for that chunk of practice anymore. That was during training camp, really, when we could be out there and even watch 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 drills. So it sure looked like he was out there kind of going around with the team.
Okay, great.
So yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they're easing him into it. They don't want to just throw a full load up. But if he even gets 2 weeks of full practice contact, I think he's ready to go.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't.
So you might be right about week 2.
Yeah, if it goes all the way to week 3, I'd probably be a little surprised, to be honest. The more I think about it, and week 1 is not entirely impossible. A couple players returned to practice. Isaiah Rodgers, with his concussion, was back on the practice field, as was defensive end Kwity Paye. From his bone bruise, scary moment last week against the in 11-on-11 work, where he went down clutching his knee. So good to see a couple players that we anticipate playing major roles, Kwity especially, on the defensive side of the ball this year, back out there at practice, and they'll have 2 weeks to ramp up again before week 1. Punter Rigoberto Sanchez placed on season-ending injured reserve, as we expected, with his Achilles injury. Safety Armani Watts placed on season-ending injured reserve with his ankle injury that he sustained. And the Colts, that's kind of the health update right now.
They also put Trevor Denbo on IR.
Trevor Denbo, the NFL's leader in special teams tackles in the preseason.
This is after the cut down, so he is eligible to return at some point this year.
Right.
He has to miss at least 4 weeks, right?
Correct.
Yes. So that's where he is right now. And for a team that I think Denbo was absolutely a Bubba addition to this roster.
Yeah.
Like
there's 3 or 4 guys that they are Bubba guys.
He gets a couple say-sos here and there. And with how young this roster is and how they're really changing over. Did we talk about this last week?
10 rookies.
10 rookies and 4 undrafted free agents.
And there are 26 players, 25 or younger.
First of all, okay, let's I'm going to hold off. We're going to get to that, I promise, when we get to the 53, because I have some thoughts on that. Based on exactly what the Colts are saying and what I think, and we'll see what you guys think about what I think.
You probably disagree, as I do, with some of the things that they say.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I think there's another side to this story that the Colts are not keen to share. But anyway, the Colts' second home game of the season is sold out against the Titans week 4. The Chiefs game week 3, of course, is already sold out as well. That was announced earlier. So first chance to see the Colts this week will be against Jacksonville in week 6. Plenty of good seats still available probably for that game, I would imagine, or decent seats at least, if it's not the best seats in the house, to see Jacksonville come into town. The Colts did make a trade to try to round out their 53-man roster, help with special teams in particular. Linebacker Grant Stewart? I think it's Stewart.
I think it
Stewart. They did a pick swap with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They sent a 6th pick to the Bucs. The Bucs sent the Colts Stewart and a 7th-round pick for next year. So had 11 special teams tackles a year ago. That's a lot of special teams tackles. Like, people see 11 tackles like that's not that much, but it really is in terms of special teams wise a good number of special teams tackles. And since the Colts let go of guys like a George Odom, a Matthew Adams, and
Jordan
Glasgow, like, they need special teams help. Bubba was talking about the special teams coordinator, Bubba Ventrone, that their special teams coaching or their coaching, they haven't done this much coaching since 2017 or 2018 when these guys broke into the league. All these young guys with Zaire Franklin, Syracuse University, Matt Adams, and George Odom, all those guys Like they need to learn what to do, and now they're doing it all over again. It's a vicious cycle of the business. Guys like a George Odom in particular, you get better. You're a first-team All-Pro special teams player 2 years ago, and then you want to be a starter somewhere. You want to earn starter money. You want to do more than special teams. And that's great. If you can do it, fantastic. Good luck. Guys like Matthew Slater, the Patriots special teamer, who's been a special teamer for 12 years or 13 years, like that's the aberration. A lot of guys get good when they're younger and then go off to try to be a starter or at least a role player somewhere else. So the Colts find themselves in that situation with a couple of their players, so they need to coach up this new young crop of guys. Stewart's gonna help them do that, kind of bridge that gap a little bit.
Yeah, Stewart, I think he had 26 snaps on defense and 300 on special teams, 311. So that's what he is.
Yep.
And you say that the way these guys develop, Zaire Franklin was a special teams guy. And you work your way up, and now he's not only a starter, but he got a second contract.
That's
so
huge.
It's I always
And
sort
a
of
captain, a special teams captain as well.
I always feel a bit sorry for Bubba because you're in the meetings and they're talking personnel and they're talking offense, defense, and you're sitting there saying, "Well, what about me?"
Right.
I don't want to say he gets the leftovers, but they're going to, you're going to get guy that can't really do something else at this point. And you've got to make that work. And he's done a great job of making guys. Jordan Glasgow probably barely saw the field on defense, but he was a good player. Now they've kind of reloaded. That was a kind of a quick reload with him. Was he here for 2 years?
I believe only 2 years, yeah.
So, but again, it's we always sort of have a tendency to downplay special teams until you have a blocked punt or a long return or whatever, and then you say, I guess that is pretty important.
What does Hancock Health's membership in the Mayo Clinic Care Network mean for you? It means our independent health network now has access to the knowledge and resources of the world leader in medicine. It means your Hancock Health doctor can now consult with Mayo Clinic specialists to confirm a diagnosis or treatment plan. And it means that together, we're making health possible for you. Learn more about our new clinical collaboration at hancockregional.org/Mayo Clinic.
You're going to have that memorized by the end of the season.
I just might. I'm halfway there right now. The Colts have made the roster cut from 81, technically down to 53. As Chap alluded to it earlier, some overarching big notes right now. 10 rookies, 4 undrafted rookie free agents.
Was last year when they had the streak snapped?
They did. Just last year.
It was like 22 years?
22 years in a row, the Colts had an undrafted rookie make the roster. Last year,
4.
nobody did. And there you're cheering about depth, and you have developed players. And it's like we have a solid roster right now. It's hard to make the team. It might have been a little bit easier to make this team than it was in years past. That's just a fact. Maybe it's not the starters. We knew what the starting unit was. Really, the only question.
I'm fine with almost all the starters.
Yeah, me too. The only question was at safety, and Nick Cross appears to be getting the nod right now.
I'm still a little bit nervous about left tackle, but that's.
Mm-hmm. But it's prior, and it's never been anybody else throughout training camp.
Correct.
It was never really in question. But the depth on this team is questionable. Period. It just is. And if your response is, well, Chris Ballard has done well in the past, and he has a binder of players that he wants to go to. Like, easy. Because there are 10 rookies on this roster. 1 out of every 5 players
20% of your roster
is a rookie. 4 of those 10 are undrafted rookies. Guys that 32 teams passed on
including
6 or
you.
7 times, including yourself. If you have to dive deep into your pool of reserves, into your depth, you're asking for trouble with this. And Frank Reich can talk all he wants about how coaches love having young players and love to be able to develop them and love the talent they have. And guys have to play. Chris Ballard saying they have to play to get experience. You're right. They do have to play to get experience. You're 100% right. The Colts are very much an inexperienced team this year when you look past the starting unit specifically. I think their starting unit has a good deal of experience. There are spots here and there where it's not the case. But when you go, especially when you just go to depth, and this happens to every team in the NFL, you have to rely on your reserves to get you a couple games here in the season. And it don't know whether it's going to be an offensive line, defensive line, wide receivers, linebackers. It hits every team at some point. And when I saw the roster and when I saw the 10 rookies and 4 undrafted rookies, Chap, I just thought the Colts were playing with fire. That was my first reaction to seeing the 53 guys that made this team.
And we go back to where the cornerstones of this team, it's the offensive line, defensive line. That's where it's at. Defensive line, I think they're in pretty good shape. You'd like to have another tackle, but this is a strong defensive line. Offensive line, holy smokes. Let's say this starting line, the 5 is fine. They're fine. Okay, we're buying Pryor at left tackle and Penner at right guard. 3. Then you've got Dennis Kelly, who they re-signed, and he was at practice today and didn't practice.
Right. So he doesn't really count.
We've not seen him practice.
Yep.
He didn't practice at OTAs, had a knee procedure in camp, and still hadn't practiced. So then your backups are, I believe, Will Fries, who played, I think it was 22 snaps last year at 2 games, and 3 rookies. So it's one of the rookies you claimed off waivers from Buffalo. Right. So that's, and again, this is sort of where they are. They tried to address this, remember, with Kelly and with Jason Spriggs. So it's not like they didn't. It's like last year they brought in Sam Tavy and Julian Davenport, and they didn't work.
Yes.
But when Chris Ballard talked on Wednesday, it's not that he said depth is important, it is, but like he's kind of responding to the reality. Hey, we're young, and they got to play. The way you get experience is to play. Mm-hmm. Well, I understand that, but to have it at key positions, it's worrisome. If an offensive lineman goes down, you're kind of wringing your hands. You just are. 10 rookies on a roster of a team that's considered the favorite to win the AFC South and do something. It's a lot of rookies.
Yeah. Joe, I think Chap's assessment that defensive line is maybe one of the best units in terms of depth. Offensive line is, again, the one that I was mostly nervous about. And only 8 guys came out of camp. I know, like he said, that they signed a guy, or they claimed a guy.
And then they re-signed Kelly, who they cut for that was massage on the roster.
Right, exactly. There was a little bit of that.
But he's not ready. He won't be ready to play week 1.
Exactly. He's not ready to go. So, like, right now, your backup tackle, period, is Bernard Ryman. Is a 3rd-round rookie.
Both sides.
And exactly. And I don't know, if Braden Smith gets hurt, I wouldn't be surprised if they move Pryor over there and have Ryman at left tackle. I don't think he's taken a single right tackle snap. I
bet he did at some point in camp.
Maybe.
But we're talking like on one hand.
Yeah, exactly. He took a whole lot more at left tackle. So
that would you always hate to mess with 2 positions to fix 1 position.
But that's what you'd have to do.
That was probably what you'd have to do.
In a couple of different scenarios, like in a couple of different ways. If Ryan Kelly goes down, Danny Pinter's still the backup center right now. Like Wesley French, it's great. Then you'd bring in Will Fries there to that spot. So you mess up 2 spots again. Like it's going to be a little bit of a game of musical chairs if an offensive lineman gets hurt.
Remember, they did that during camp, that for a brief period they put Ryman at left tackle and they put, which Pryor surprised me, they put Pryor at right tackle and Smith at right guard.
They did.
Which was strange.
That was strange.
Because then you are messing with the right side when you don't need to.
Entirely.
But, it'll work or it won't. It's kind of like the receiver position. It'll work or it won't.
Yeah. Anyway, let's run down position by position here and just get a little bit more in-depth on this 53-man roster. The Colts kept 3 quarterbacks, Matt Ryan, Nick Foles, Sam Ehlinger. Ehlinger had himself a very fine preseason. 24 for 29, nearly 300 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Also had a big rush against the Buccaneers, Joe, for that touchdown. He was a playmaker. As Chap has said in the past, the preseason is made for a guy like Sam Ehlinger, but he did everything he needed to do to make this roster, and there he is on the 53 at the end of the day.
I mean, Chris Ballard said it himself. He played his way onto the roster.
Yep.
If he hadn't have played this well in the preseason, I'm not sure he's on the 53-man team right now. So preseason does matter. People win or lose jobs during these games, and Ehlinger won his job.
And I'm still not in favor of it.
Yeah, Chaps.
I totally understand their rationale. Had the great preseason, he earned it. And there's no question that they believe, and they're probably right, that had they waived him to bring him back on the practice squad, he's claimed. I understand all of that. But right now, you're carrying a player on the roster when roster spots are valuable who won't play this year. And, if Foles plays well and he's your backup next year, he doesn't play next year. Maybe we were kicking stuff around in the press room. Maybe their thought is that you've got Ryan for 2 years. Maybe Foles is a backup this year, and then you move to Ellinger next year. I don't know. But it's just rare and odd that they're carrying a player who, barring the really unforeseen, is not going to play this year. Maybe if injuries hit and you're carrying 2 or 3 guys who have 1 or 2 week injuries that can't play, then you risk putting him out there in week 4 because you have to. They did that a couple of years ago with Terrell Basham, who it was his second year, and he really hadn't done much, but they needed the roster spot. But, I understand what they do, but sometimes there's a difference of opinion, and this is one I'm not in favor of. But I don't – either they didn't ask my opinion or that I didn't get the message, one of the two.
Yeah, I was – I love, Ellinger. I'm glad he made the team because, he did great things in the preseason. He's an easy guy to root for. But I was trying to figure out how this made sense with the, Foles and Ryan both being on 2-year deals. Are they just going to keep 3 quarterbacks for the next 2 seasons?
But I'm sure I look at the contracts. You're not going to walk away from Brian's. It's guaranteed. But
no,
Foles won't be that much if you cut him next year.
Exactly. So he might be more year to year than his 2-year contract would indicate. Or maybe they were in training camp and they weren't as sure about what they saw from Nick Foles. Maybe they thought in their evaluation Ellinger was a lot closer to Nick Foles than they had anticipated. If something happens to Ryan, Foles goes out there and struggles, maybe it's a short leash and Ellinger could be out next. Who knows what the thought was? But I was just trying to figure out a rationale where carrying these 3 quarterbacks where the first 2 seemed to be so entrenched made sense.
The Colts did keep 3 quarterbacks back in 2020 out of camp. That was Rivers, Brissett, and then Jacob Eason. Of course, that was as a rookie, a 4th-round pick, Jacob Eason, that they didn't want to let go to waivers.
Did they open last year with just the 2?
They did, yes, only 2 last year.
Because Sam was on IR.
Correct.
Yes,
okay.
That's
correct. So, yeah, he played and got hurt there late in the preseason. So, yeah, there we are. So 3 quarterbacks. Also 3 running backs, which is the fewest number of running backs that they have kept in the Chris Ballard era. They've kept 4 every year, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 3. So that gives you another roster spot there to play with. Probably the surprise is that they cut Phillip Lindsey, who seemed to have a pretty good preseason. I thought was really good in short yardage in the preseason. But the 3 players who make the roster, Jonathan Taylor, Nyheim Hines, no surprise, and then Deion Jackson, who, again, was a special teams guy a year ago. And so you have him on to be more of a special teams player, something Phillip Lindsey did not do during training camp.
As Marlon Mack did last year.
Exactly. And Marlon Mack was week after week, basically, on the inactive list.
And then he asked the team for a trade.
Exactly. So is that what you're going to do with Phillip Lindsey, or are you just going to leave him on the inactive list every week, or are you going to cut him and maybe have somebody who does play from time to time? So I understand what the Colts are doing there because they rarely have 4 running backs active in 1 week. And they say they like Deion Jackson's running. I'll tell you this, Phillip Lindsey's a better runner. There's no doubt about that. You can like Deion Jackson all you want, but Phillip Lindsey's the better runner, period. So if it comes to a point where Jonathan Taylor gets hurt, knock on wood.
He hasn't to this point. Knock again. I mean,
Right.
He hasn't. He's missed one
Like ever.
game in 2 years.
Yeah. And that was because he was close contact.
Correct.
Right?
Over Thanksgiving or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But the problem, it's to say a problem. The issue I've got is if something happens to where Taylor's out for 2 or 3 weeks, I don't want Nyheim Hines all of a sudden being my feature guy.
Right.
You still want him to be the 5 or 6 carries and
5 or 6 receptions.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so maybe the idea is that if JT goes down for any length of time, you can find somebody. Was it a couple years ago that Jonathan Williams came in and rushed for 100 yards twice?
Yep.
So and Phillip Lindsey's still out there. So Chris Ballard said, I'm not closing the door. We'll see.
Right.
Maybe they scoop. If that happened, they scoop Marlon Mack up off the Texans practice squad.
Again, I think that's their rationale is if things are working the way this team hopes it is, you've got the offensive line, you've got a passing game that might not be lethal, but it'll be efficient, and at the risk of dissing running backs everywhere, you can find a running back to get you short term.
And maybe they think more of Hines as more of a whole backup to Taylor than we do, because that's how they used him in the preseason. I get it's just preseason, but I remember the Buffalo game, they were just hammering him up the middle. They weren't mixing him in as if if Taylor wasn't there, it would be half Hines, half Lindsey or Jackson or whoever the other running back was. They used him like an every down back. So maybe they think he's developed to the point where they can, not 20 runs a game, but maybe close to 10 to 15 plus the reception
Without totally
work.
wearing him down and wearing him out.
Exactly.
They did bring Devontae Price back to the practice squad as a rookie. I saw him playing a lot in special teams out there in Westfield. So I'm not surprised to see him back, because I think the Colts like some long-term upside for him, or maybe something that if Deion Jackson gets another opportunity elsewhere, then Price could be that special teams guy sometime in the future. Chris Ballard talking about the Lindsey versus Jackson debate. Phillip's great, and I'm not ruling out ever bringing him back again, but Deion, he did some good things too. The special teams gave him the nod without question, and that's important. Wide receiver. 6 wide receivers on the 53-man roster.
They like their wide receivers.
They do. Well, so they say. So they continue to say over and over again.
That was the team's.
Michael Pittman
stance.
Jr. Chap, I went up to you, Chap, in the during the Tampa Bay game in the press box, and after the first team was over, I said, Chap, Michael Pittman, 3 targets. Who was it? It was Nyheim Hines, 3 targets. Mo Alley Cox, 1 target. That was it. Yep. From the first team right there. Those 3 guys. Like no Alec Pierce, no Paris Campbell, no Jelani Woods in any type of situation. It was Pittman, and then check down.
The only question, and we'll have this at some point, is will he catch 100 balls
or 150?
Or I was going to say 120, but he's going to catch 100 plus and have average 11 yards a catch, and that's going to be fine. But I just don't see where we're talking today in practice is how will you tier their receivers? Now that they're pass catchers. Pittman 1
by himself.
Hines 2.
Yeah.
Who's 3? It won't be Jonathan Taylor, I don't think.
I think it's Paris for right now.
I would hope it's Paris, but it's so clear that Pittman is number 1 with a bullet, and if he stays healthy, he's not gonna pass Marvin's 143.
Right. I say 150 in jest.
But what's the record? 148.
NFL record 148 from Michael Thomas a couple years ago, isn't it?
And he paid for it with missing like 2 seasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, good. Michael Pittman. He's shown so much growth as a player from his rookie year, where he was kind of like T.Y.'s sidekick sort of. He's the guy. He is the guy. And
I agree.
But I hope they can diversify a little bit, diversify up to where someone else is at least something of a threat.
Yeah, to kind of quantify what we're talking about. So this is the Colts preseason target share with Matt Ryan throwing. Michael Pittman Jr. an insane 35% of Matt Ryan's targets. The next closest is Paris Campbell and Alec Pierce and Nyheim Hines, who all around 12%. I don't think Pittman Jr. is going to have a 35% target share throughout the regular season.
I would hope not.
That's crazy. A good target share for a wide receiver, for like a stud number 1 wide receiver, is maybe like 20 to 25, somewhere in there. And I think the floor with him is probably 25%.
Yeah,
I think their other guys are just going to have it spread around. There's not going to be a clear number 2.
After Pittman, on the 6 wide receivers on the roster, Paris Campbell, Alec Pierce, Ashton Doolin, Des Patman, and Mike Strawn. So both of those last 2 guys made it. They cut Kiki Kuti, but signed him to the practice squad. Ethan Fernia, also on the practice squad. Then DeMichael Harris, Samson Nakua, all cut as well. Chris Ballard says Desmond Patman came on there at the end, and we like Strawn's talent about those 2 guys. Then on T.Y. Hilton, do I think T.Y. can still play? Absolutely I do. I'm never going to shut the door on it, but right now I like our group. We like our group. So
I think the door is almost shut and it's not locked.
I think an injury.
Is his poster still on Lucas Oil Stadium?
Coming from the south side, I take 65 north, 70 west to 465 north, and I always go by Lucas Oil.
Yeah.
And I'm looking. Firstly, you got to see is there a thanks for the memories, and his picture's still there. In 10 days till the season, don't you got to do something?
I would think so.
I mean,
He's the only one who's not a current player on that building.
Do they have a JT mural ready to go up there? And it's awkward. Can you imagine?
Had an off season to make one.
Oh, it's ready. But can you imagine the marketing people, the marketing director saying, "Yeah, we got to do something." Somebody go and with your newest guy on the staff, go ask Chris Ballard if it's okay to take T.Y.'s picture down off Lucas Oil. But at some point, you can't go into the season with his mural on the stadium when he's not on your roster. It's something stupid to worry about, but it's one of 4 pictures.
Yep. So, we'll see about that. And
things that I worry about.
Right. Who's on the side of Lucas Oil Stadium? More pass catchers: Mo Alley-Cox, Kylan Granson, Jelani Woods are the 3 tight ends. A couple players were cut. Nikola Kalinic went to the practice squad. Also signed another undrafted rookie, Jarrett Scott, to the practice squad, who is not here in training camp. But yeah, we talked about 3 quarterbacks eating up a spot on a roster, one of them. But to have only 3 tight ends and only 3 running backs, that kind of allows you a little bit more flexibility, I guess, what they've done there.
And I think it tells you, I think they would like to keep 4 tight ends.
Yes.
And there's not the value there.
Right.
I think they'd like to keep 4 running backs, and they believe that they can manage with it the way it is. The 3 tight ends, it worries me, and that's what it complicated the wide receiver issue to where, we've only got this on receiver, but we got these tight ends that we can rely on, which in the past they have. This is, you want to say, a wild card. Paris Campbell is a major wild card with injuries. Kylan Granson, it's there for him.
Yep.
He's the guy in that F role that can get out, catch balls down the field, and you see it at times, and then sometimes you don't. But that's kind of what you're going to get with him.
If it could be Pittman and then some combination of Hines, Granson, and Campbell up there, if 2 of those guys step up on a weekly basis, if 2 out of the 3, I think you feel, Joe, pretty good about where your pass catchers are. It's just a question of if those guys are going to step up on a weekly basis.
Especially early, because I do have a strong feeling that towards the end of the season, Alec Pierce is really going to come on and be a reliable player for maybe not a star.
I always ignore Alec Pierce. And good. I'm glad that you bring him up because you're right. I think he's going to get better as the year goes on. I'm just not quite putting him in that tier just yet because I don't think he's ready. If he is, surprise me, and then I'm wrong. And that's
I kind of feel the same way. If Paris Campbell, obviously I'd love if he stayed healthy the whole year, but if he could give them 6 weeks to kind of give Pierce time to kind of get acclimated to NFL gameplay, that'd be great because I think by midseason, Pierce is really going to be contributing. But yeah, I feel the same way you do, Granson. So, Mike, can you remind me about these rules in terms of on game day? You can bring up a few practice squad players, right? And technically,
I believe we were, whether Chris didn't, it's 2. You can bring up 2 practice squad players.
So on game day, you have 53. Or 55, right?
It's 55, right.
But you still need more inactives because you can only have...
Right. The inactive, it's still the active day roster is the same. What is it, 46?
Yes.
So,
okay.
But you can, and you can bring up practice squad players.
I'm just, tight ends just looking if, heaven forbid, Mo Alley or Jelani Woods goes down, it's not like Kylan Granson's someone you want to rely on to block. So all of a sudden what you do in your 2 tight end sets, which Frank Wright has a lot of.
Correct.
So to only have 3 active tight ends and one of them's not really much of a blocker, that's a little concerning to me. And the other one's a rookie. So when I look at this tight end group in terms of blocking, yes, Mo Alley-Cox is a very good blocker, but the rest of the guys, that's a huge question mark going into the season.
I go back to some of they show highlights of some of Taylor's big runs last year.
Oh.
And it's Jack Durrell just smothering a guy on a wham block. And the running backs appreciate that. And I'm not sure these guys, Mo Alley-Cox can do it, but the other 2 guys, you can either block or you can't.
I'm going to say this. I think the Colts really need Granson or Jelani to step up as a pass catcher because they might have to leave Mo Alley in to block a lot more than his number 1 tight end label might indicate.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to the offensive line. The other guys who will be blocking. The Colts came out of the first 53-man cut with only 8, And that's not a complete aberration from the past. They've kept between 8 and 10 guys under Chris Ballard. Just the difference in who was on that. We talked a little bit about this earlier, just the experience or lack thereof of the guys behind the starting unit. But it's at 10 right now. So instead of 8, in addition to the 8, well, let's go over the 8 first. Braden Smith, Matt Pryor, the 2 starting tackles, and then Bernard Ryman, a backup. Interior offensive line, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Danny Pinner, your 3 starters, and then Will Fries, a backup guard, Wesley French, a backup center who has a little bit of center guard flexibility, according to Chris Ballard at least. But then they added 2 more players in the days after the cut to 53. Tackle Dennis Kelly, Chap alluded to, out at practice today, still not practicing. And then Luke Tenuta, rookie that they claimed from, did you say from Buffalo?
Buffalo.
Somebody say that? Okay.
Was he a 7th round pick, 6th round pick?
6th round pick from Buffalo. Big guy, 6'8".
Hey,
So
there you go.
Doesn't
Like
have the
big
arm
guys.
length I would love, under 33-inch
The
arms.
offseason
But,
basketball team's going to be a bear.
It is, yeah, it really is.
They will own the paint.
Right, for real.
really will.
But yeah, that's what it looks like on the offensive line. I like the starting unit. Once you go past there, especially right now with Dennis Kelly just hurt and not practicing at all. Like I said, you are playing with fire right there, especially on the offensive line to me.
They really have 2 guys who you can kind of go, okay, I feel all right about. I feel pretty decent about Will Fries. I do. I think he could give you serviceable. I don't want to count on him for a whole season, but if he needs to come in and give you a game or 2, I really think he's going to be solid. Obviously, the rookie Ryman's a giant question mark, but there's a lot that we like about him. So I guess give him the opportunity to go in and see what you got early with the guy, because he does have high upside. So it's kind of one of those, it could be a huge swing. You don't know which way it's going to go. You give up 3 sacks, or he could come in and you go, oh, he might be our left tackle of the future. So the depth upon the offensive line, as you guys have talked about, is a little bit concerning. Keeps me up at night more than who's on Lucas Oil Stadium, I'll tell you that.
Chris Ballard said, we feel good about where we're at with the depth. They're young, but that's not a bad thing. Well, it's not a good thing either.
It's not ideal.
No, it's not. It's not the ideal thing. I don't think it's hard to be ideal with depth. It is. Let me say that first of all in the NFL, like it is really difficult.
How many teams have a backup left tackle that you say, if
Right.
our guys in, we're fine?
You feel great. No. Like if I could get a sentence out right here, but there's a difference between having experienced backups and having inexperienced backups. You just
Every
feel
team
better.
has depth.
I think.
You've got a
Yes.
53-man roster.
Yeah.
It's the quality of the depth.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't you guys feel like so much better if they just still had Chris Reed?
Or Anthony
just like
Costanzo.
question.
some kind of, well, obviously.
You know what's crazy? Eric Fisher is still out there.
I was reading about him today. It said like he's turned down 9 offers. He's kind of just waiting on the perfect situation to come up.
Does that translate into team or money?
I'm not sure. I was kind of surprised, he didn't end up in Dallas when they lost Tyrone Smith. I think they ended up signing Jason Peters, I saw today.
Yeah, they did.
Which is crazy. He's like 40.
Turncoat.
They
going from
signed,
the Eagles to the
him
Cowboys.
instead of Eric Fisher.
Jeez,
I'm not
yeah.
sure what that says.
Is that going to add another year to his Hall of Fame?
Yes.
Their chap, if he signing with Dallas.
Which he's clearly a Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah, he was one of the elite left tackles of his generation. That's hard to do. So,
But hey, I will say this about the offensive line depth. Some of these guys are going to have to play, and if at the end of the year we get through it and they play pretty well, you're going to go, great, we got some good young depth on offensive lines on rookie contracts who we can rely on going forward.
What was it, 2020, when they started the same group, all 16 games, 2019 and 2020?
one of those 2 years. Yeah.
And then last year they started 10 different combinations.
Yeah.
So
That was less than ideal.
less than ideal.
Again, less than ideal.
What would you call a great health system? Just a few minutes down the road from Indianapolis, where you can see some of the area's top doctors and healthcare teams in great facilities, including one of the safest hospitals in America, and maybe even save a buck or 2 on your healthcare. We call it Hancock Health. So if you're looking for smart, safer, affordable care, head east to Hancock Health, where we're making health possible for the people of East Central Indiana and beyond.
Defense now. 6 defensive ends on the Colts roster. Yannick Ngakoue, Kwity Paye, Tyquan Lewis and Dio Dangbo, who both have some flexibility to go inside. And then Ben Banigou, once again, makes the roster. Once again. You can't get rid of Ben. And then
maybe it was the coordinator.
It could have been.
In this instance,
yes,
it was probably the coordinator.
Who said, I want him. Yeah, Gus Bradley.
No, I was thinking the other way around. The other first coordinator did not want him.
Oh, okay.
Eberflus just wouldn't play him.
Yeah.
So there's no question of changing coordinators. I think Gus said, hey, I think this guy can be, he's the backup to Ngakoue, so it's amazing what a change of coordinators can do for a guy's career.
Ifeadi Odenibo, the last of the six right there. And Cameron Klein.
The G is silent, right? Odenibo?
Odenibo. Okay. Odenibo.
As long as you spell it right.
Exactly. That's all Chap has to do. And he has to train his
autocorrects.
Yes,
God,
to Odangbo.
It gets to where it finally got
understands
Odangbo right. Now it got another one. It's just driving me crazy.
They did it just to annoy Mike Chappell.
Thank you very much.
4 more players on the defensive interior. DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart. There's not a lot of teams in the NFL who feel better about their starting 2 on the inside than those 2 guys, nor should they.
That one series Grover had.
Monster.
He shut it down inside the 10-yard line.
Yes, he
shut
did.
it down.
You love to see it. And then Eric Johnson, the rookie, and then Byron Cowart, an interior player who's Chris Ballard called him a good backup, a good reserve 3 technique who could go in there and fill in if Buckner goes.
Don't ask me about him because I couldn't tell you.
He was he on the roster last year at all? I think he might have been on the practice squad or something. But anyway, yeah, it's him over. Excuse me, a guy like Curtis Brooks, the rookie out of Cincinnati, who is on the practice squad, as is Chris Williams to the practice squad. What, Joe?
Sorry,
don't have it. No, sorry. I thought you had it. You smacked your lips. I was like, oh, he's got it. He's got the information in front of him that he needs.
They claimed him in July. He's been with the New England Patriots.
Okay. Here's me shutting up then. Not the case. But yeah, 10 defensive linemen is exactly what we've seen from them in the past a couple different times. Yeah, that's the standard number. And Chap, with guys like a Tyquan Lewis especially, and also Dio, who can go inside, to see a little bit heavy on the defensive end here is not surprising at all, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know how often. Sometimes when you platoon, I don't know whether you say they platoon or they rotate guys in. Maybe there are times you have a complete second line in there. But these guys need the versatility to mix and match. And I think Chris Ballard mentioned that as valuable and difference-making as Buckner is, you don't want him playing 60 snaps. And so you need to get guys in there. But we've talked about, I think Tyquan Lewis could be such a huge part of this defense. We saw it last year. Mm-hmm. And until he went down, he was making plays.
Yep.
So I think a player like that, if I'm a player, generally, leave me at a spot. Defensive line's different. He can play all 4 spots. I wouldn't want him at nose tackle very often. But I'm pulling for this guy, and he's huge to what this defense can do again, because I think they're probably short one tackle that they really feel good about. But this is as good a line. I was going back thinking when I felt as good about this line, and it's back in the Freeney Mathis years, and then they had Raheem Brock from Temple, I think it was. He was a quality player. This line isn't that good because you've not got Freeney Mathis, but this is a good line.
Let's go to the linebackers. 6 linebackers on the final roster. Shaquille Leonard was activated from PUP to put on the 53 to allow him to practice this week, which we talked about that earlier. Bobby Okereke, Zaire Franklin, E.J. Speed, no surprise with those 4. And then JoJo Doman, the undrafted rookie out of Nebraska, makes the roster. And the Colts made that trade we mentioned earlier for Grant Stewart from Tampa Bay to be that final reserve special teams type guy. No significant, I don't think, things to talk about here. They did cut my guy, Sterling Weatherford. Very disappointing to see Sterling not make the team. And Chris Ballard was saying that was, in particular, a painful cut because also the Bears scooped him up.
Right up.
So,
Eberflus.
He's gone. Yep, Eberflus took him right out from
Another
under his
reason
nose.
not to like the guy.
Yeah,
Good
exactly.
riddance.
Eberflus. But yeah, Sterling. Seriously, best of luck to Sterling with Chicago, local guy, Hamilton Heights Husky. So hope he does well, just not at the expense of the Colts. So those are your linebackers. Let's see here. We got here cornerbacks. 5 corners on this roster. Stephon Gilmore, Kenny Moore, Brandon Faison, Isaiah Rodgers, the top 4, no surprises. If you're looking up and down the list of 53, probably Byron Coward is the one I would say that people would be like, who's that? If you just saw the name, if you're a Colts fan and you're scrolling up and down. But Dallas Flowers is probably right along there with him, if not just right behind him. Dallas Flowers, the rookie out of Pittsburgh State, saw a little time there. Played cornerback, was a return man. We saw him return a very nice kick in the Tampa Bay game as well. The Colts like that flexibility from him. They also like his ability to be a one-on-one corner, a man-to-man corner. Certainly, you hope you don't see a whole lot of him right now in defense because you hope everybody in front of him stays healthy. But he's a guy that the more I watched camp, the more I'm not totally surprised by this pick. I kind of thought they would go elsewhere. I wouldn't have put him on my final 53, but Chap is a guy that you definitely need corners and you need secondary depth, and these guys are really important in special teams, whether they're gunners or filling out the role of kick return and getting down and disrupting plays early with their speed. Flowers is a guy that can do that, so he makes the final 53-man roster.
Yeah, and they cut Tony Brown to make room. I think was it for the waiver claim?
I think so. Yes, Tony Brown was on this initially as well.
But then they brought him back to the practice squad. So the way teams handle this, he's essentially on your 53 plus.
Right.
So it's very easily or very possible or likely that he'll be active several games because they like Tony Brown. I remember that Frank was asked about 3 or 4 guys at the end of camp or before the cuts, and he talked about Weatherford, and he talked a bunch about Tony Brown. Mm-hmm. So, and again, in the NFL, today's NFL, if you haven't got 4 corners, you can't play.
Yeah.
And you need 5. So they've got quality there, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Stephon Gilmore play.
Me too.
When it matters.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to see it. And because I might have a few questions early just about is he still that guy? From what we saw, he's still that guy.
Yeah.
Week 1, Gilmore versus Brandon Cooks.
Test him right away. See. We will see. Go ahead.
I will say it's pretty impressive Flowers made it over a lot of guys that Colts fans would recognize the names. I mean, Marvell Tell, Anthony Chesley, Chris Wilcox. These are guys who have played for the Colts in the past.
Yep.
So pretty impressive for a undrafted free agent.
Safeties, 4 of them. Julian Blackman, Nick Cross, Rodney McLeod, and Rodney Thomas, the rookie out of Yale. That's right. Go Bulldogs.
7th round pick.
How about that? Making the final roster. He had a pretty good game against Tampa as well. Probably went a ways in earning that spot. They cut Marcel Dabo, signed to the practice squad, the international exemption there. Not surprised to see him there. Also, undrafted rookie Trevor Denbo did make the team. So they had 5 safeties initially before being placed on injured reserve. He can return, though, after 4 games. We mentioned him a little bit earlier, a special teams guy. Led the NFL in special teams tackles in the preseason, but he's going to have to wait at least a little bit to be back on this roster in the future. So the more you look at it, as I am raining hellfire and brimstone and saying whether the sky is falling with the depth on this team, like my concerns are certainly more with the offensive side of the ball than they are for the defense. I think the defense has more guys where, like, if somebody gets dinged up, then you feel better about somebody else coming in. Like linebacker, I feel good about EJ Speed filling in. I really do. And Zaire Franklin, both of them after this, if you're talking about 2. Like if one of the top cornerbacks gets hurt, I feel okay about Isaiah Rodgers seeing a little bit more time. I really feel good about that. Safety, if Rodney McLeod sees more time, he's seen a lot of time in the NFL right now. And then we already talked about the defensive line depth. So my concerns more with depth are on the offensive side of the ball specifically, probably offensive line and then wide receiver entirely. But that's so as we go through this, I just wanted to make that clarification that Chap, I really do think they have some pretty good depth on the defensive side of the ball, guys that have played in the past that can step in when necessary.
Yeah, and you hope you don't need the depth,
right?
But you do need the depth like on defensive line. Linebackers not so much. The secondary not so much either because you're going to play, barring injuries, X number of guys, X number of snaps. So, there's always areas when we get this far into the roster cuts, and there will be more changes because that's who Chris Ballard is. But by and large, this is your team. I like the defense. I like the overall depth on defense. And again, we went over it seems like our main concerns, anxieties are on offense with the offensive line.
Yep.
And receiver.
Yep. Both of them together. Also, can't finish this talk without mentioning the special teams, of course. Rodrigo Blankenship makes the final cut as kicker, long snapper Luke Rhodes, and punter Matt Hawk, who had a very good debut, Joe, for the Colts. Had 5 punts, averaged more than 50 yards, per punt, and a down punt at the 10, 9, 15, 14, and 25-yard line. So there's 2 that were at the 10 and inside, 2 more inside the 20. That's exactly what you want in the situations that he was in. Like, you want to get it down there inside the 10, and there was one that he hit was a monster. It was a 57-yarder that was right to the sideline. It was a perfect punt that left no possibility for a return. So I thought Hawk did everything you wanted in his first appearance with a horseshoe on his helmet. We'll see if he can continue to do that when the games actually matter.
Yeah, it's crazy unfortunate to lose Sanchez, but I think the Colts may have locked into Hawk because, the Bills just cut him for Matt Ariza.
How'd that work out?
Not well, because they then had to cut Ariza because he's facing these sexual charges from stuff in
they're not.
his
First of all,
college
I want
days.
to say they're not charges. This is a civil suit. So I just want to make
Civil
that.
suit,
I'm going to
not
make that
criminal.
very clear. This is not a criminal case. That's a civil case that he is facing.
Not yet, at least. I believe police are still investigating, but you are correct.
Yes.
It is a civil lawsuit. The accusations, I guess, would
Right.
be a better word.
This is another team's worry, but I would love to know what they knew and when they knew it. Buffalo.
Yep.
I don't know how they knew something, but if you knew something, how did you not know what that something was? And if you knew what that something was, even if there weren't criminal charges, how do you invest a draft pick on a guy who has this potentially facing him? I don't get it.
Yeah.
Some other teams worry.
Yep.
Exactly.
Glad we don't have to worry about
Not
it.
ours.
Hey, one thing that I just figured out here, since I tend to get on numbers, practice squad, regular season roster 53. There is a difference. If you're a rookie, you're making in contracts for the most part are week to week. A rookie's making $41,000 a week. Practice squad, you're making $11,900. So there is a difference. You tell Tony Brown, well, I'm sorry we had to cut you, but you're on the practice squad. Well, yeah, but compensate me. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So there is a
big
difference.
jump down.
Now, if you get called up on game day, you get your game check, but there is a difference in pay. And I tell you, from where it started, $11,900 for a rookie on practice squad's pretty darn good.
I'd like a spot on the practice squad.
Yeah.
Make $11,900 a week.
I'll strap a helmet on right now.
Yeah.
$11,900 a week times 17 is can't be right. It's $20,000 or $200,000.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Is that Joe money?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey.
Bang me up all you want.
That's where the money is now. It's in the web. And now that we've got these live reads in our show and our advertisements, Joe's rolling in it.
I should have tried so much harder to develop my special teams abilities throughout high school so I could be a gunner or something.
As Matt Pryor said, the more you can do, the less you get paid.
That's right. So all of us, we must be able to do everything. All of us
That's right.
back
We
here
are
on the podcast.
jacks of all trade.
Yes. Hey, 26 players on this roster are 25 years old or younger. There's a lot of youth. There's a lot of talent there. You can get excited about the talent. I don't mean to say that, oh my goodness, the sky's falling with what the Colts have on their offensive side of the ball, and not also highlight the positives. Like, there's guys that you really like what their future can be. Like
Jonathan
Ryman,
Taylor.
like
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, right. Like Alec Pierce. I think you can really like what's coming. Jelani Woods is tantalizing at tight end. There's lots of reasons to be excited about this Colts team this year, but there are also reasons to really be.
That's no reason to say you can't
tepid.
have concerns.
Yes, and I do have concerns if things happen to that starting unit. So you hope that it doesn't, but
Hey, I will say this. Remember last year about this time? I like the way the Colts are looking now. The Colts had about 5, 6, 7 injuries, guys not 100%, broken feet.
Quentin with a broken foot, the quarterback with a broken foot.
Exactly.
you can say his name, chap. It's okay.
I won't. We've got an imaginary jar that if you mention his name, you got to put $1 in it.
Okay. Yeah. Won't do it then.
An imaginary dollar, or is it just going to fall
Right
on
now,
the table?
it's an imaginary dollar.
Everything's
But
imaginary
there's a lot
so
of imaginary money in it.
There is. There is. If you listen to the chatter at camp, and especially if Jim Irsay starts talking, then it's just dollar after dollar after dollar goes into that jar. Let's see. Any more final thoughts, Joe, before we get into next week? Real football. We'll have a game to preview. Actually, we can wrap up our preseason and all that right now.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited. We got college football slate.
Yeah.
Purdue plays tonight.
Yeah.
IU plays on Friday. Notre Dame plays on Saturday. Going into the professional slate next week. I'm excited about this team. I think they have a great mix of exciting young players, but also very established veterans as well. Obviously, you can point out any team, there's going to be holes on all of them. But this is the best Colts roster from top to bottom I've seen since the Peyton Manning days. And you hate to see injuries, but Tennessee already we thought was taking a step back this year, and then they just lost one of their most important players, their top edge rusher, Harold Landry. So I think, as long as the Colts stay healthy, take care of business, it's all in front of them. Everything they want this year is in their grasp.
To me, the most important thing coming out of preseason is, and I don't mean to minimize the injuries to Riggo or to Ogletree, but if those are your injuries, I think you consider it a pretty fortunate preseason. I really do, because guys get hurt.
Yeah.
They just get hurt. So by and large, and again, they avoided a major one with Quiddy Pay. We were there.
Didn't look good.
It didn't look good. It just didn't. So I think for the most part, they have their health. And we can get into it more next week, but if this team isn't 5-2 after 7 games, they have issues.
Well, if they go 5-2, they would have bucked a couple trends probably. That Week 1 game, that in Jacksonville game.
They better be 3-1 to get to 5-2.
Chaps putting the bar high. Not really that high.
It's not high to say you've got to beat Houston and you've got to beat Jacksonville.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just a
then
bar.
They got Chiefs, Denver, and
You got
the Titans.
Tennessee first. Tennessee's
I
the
messed
fourth
up
game.
the order, but they got
Right.
those 3 in a row.
Correct.
So, got to take care of business.
Take care of business early. 1-5 start won't cut it.
We'll get to that week to week as we continue on in the Colts Blue Zone podcast throughout this season. You can follow us on Twitter at Colts Blue Zone for news and notes throughout the week. Follow us individually. Joe Hopkins is at Roto Street Joe. Mike Chappell is at mchappell51. There we go. You can follow his work, by the way, at fox59.com, cbs4indy.com. And I'm Dave Griffiths at DaveG_sports. Appreciate you listening. We will see you next week as we preview the Colts and Texans season opener on the Colts Blue Zone podcast.